A little over a year ago, WEBFISHING released to mass acclaim from the general public, with thousands of players and an overwhelmingly positive review on Steam. Today it's been completely abandoned. This game released at a time where social games were at an all-time low, and it almost single-handedly revived the genre of the chatroom game. Since its release, numerous games have been made over the course of 2025 that have attempted to replicate the massive success WEBFISHING saw on release. It was also my personal favorite game to come out in 2024. I even made this video back in November of last year about how good the game was, a video that a few people watched. In that video, I talked about how monumental WEBFISHING's potential was. I knew that with future updates, and just a few small improvements, WEBFISHING could be a game that really stood the test of time. And in many ways, the writing was on the wall that it would succeed at this. Like, streamers were playing it.
You have no name. You don't exist.
The community was doing what the community does, and the player count was very high for a game that released with basically no promotion. It seemed like WEBFISHING was going to be around for a long, long time. However, that wasn't exactly how things went. Instead, the creator released a handful of small updates, a plushie, and then dropped off the face of the planet, never to be seen again. From the outside looking in, this looked like the dev just took the money and ran, leaving a community of people to wonder what happened. But if you were actively following the game, then you know the true story. In November of 2024, the developer of WEBFISHING was doxxed by a certain online message board, a dox that was largely due to the developer and many players of WEBFISHING being part of the LGBTQ community. This dox obviously threatened the safety of the developer and forced them to close up shop. This was a tragic blow to the game's future. The bad news spread through the WEBFISHING community, who all expected more to be done with the game through coming updates and events. However, after months of silence, it's become clear that the WEBFISHING creator being doxxed has caused the game to become completely abandoned. At this point, it's unlikely WEBFISHING will ever get another update. So where does that leave the game today? What is it like to play WEBFISHING in a completely decadent state, never to be touched again? What has WEBFISHING become after being doxxed into obscurity? WEBFISHING was originally developed by one guy over the course of 5 months, known simply as West. Like with our last episode's game, Peak, WEBFISHING was originally made for a game jam, and then later polished into what we know today, and released on Steam. That's really all there is to it. It's unfortunate, but much of the development of this game is completely shrouded in mystery, aside from us being able to access a beta version of the game made for that initial game jam. It sucks, but it makes sense. This guy got doxxed off the face of the planet, so I'm sure he wasn't eager to post all of his devlogs and concept art after that. And also, to be clear, I'm going to be reviewing this game as it stands today, but I don't want my matter-of-fact, objective critic shtick to get in the way of the fact that this guy was doxxed, and that's absolutely horrible. No one should have to be doxxed for releasing a game on Steam, and it's an utter tragedy that we lost what could have been an excellent game because of what happened. I'm going to say some very harsh things about WEBFISHING during this review, but I don't want that to be interpreted as a slight against the developer or any of the people who play the game. I just want to talk about what WEBFISHING is and what it could have been, because I think it acts as a very good cautionary tale of what can happen when a game gets too big too quickly, and it shows how the actions of a few bad actors can ruin the fun for everyone. Right off the bat, the second you open the game, there's a major problem. Now that might sound a bit harsh, but just hear me out. You see, this game launched with a major vulnerability somewhere in its online netcode that allows hackers to scrape your IP, kick you from your game, and much more. Now I know this sounds like a setup to a paid VPN ad, but believe it or not, this is an actual problem that lies within the game. The rampant existence of hackers, bots, and IP scrapers is part of the reason why this game has such a bad reputation in certain places. Having an online game where your place of living can be leaked to the world just for playing it is not going to keep a strong player base for long, simply because people care about their privacy. And unfortunately, because this game has been left completely dormant, none of these issues are going to be fixed by the developer. The solution the player base has come up with is to just make code-only or private lobbies, so that bad actors and script kiddies can't join and steal all of their data, or, just to use a VPN. But the impetus shouldn't be on the player to fix these issues. It's because of that I can never recommend this game in good conscience to other people, because it just isn't a safe game to play unless you're planning on turning your PC into a digital doomsday bunker. Some people have stated that the game no longer has any issues with hackers, and that security vulnerabilities have been completely patched out. But, the developer has never stated this to be the case in any patch note or announcement. and reports still persist on the game's Steam discussion page, so it's probably still broken. Also, just look at it, dude. Being for real, okay? No script, being for real. If you can do this in this game with a regular program that you can download off the internet, there's probably a lot worse that could be done with just a few more Google searches. So I don't trust that this game is secure in any capacity. This is the most important reason for why I believe the game has dropped off in popularity so much. Despite how good the game is, and trust me, this game is very good, there's all this nonsense surrounding it that makes it impossible to recommend to other people. This game is like a really good coffee shop that makes the best latte you've ever had, but in order to get there, you have to walk through the Bronx covered in gold jewelry, butt naked at 3 in the morning. You can't even talk about these issues on the webfishing subreddit anymore because of the sheer amount of complaints people submitted around the game's release. It's just so frustrating because, there's a lot to love about webfishing, but most people have to treat it with kid gloves just to enjoy any of that. Know that all of the praise I give this game's design from here on out is under the pretense that you can actually play it safely, and it's completely unacceptable the game has been left in this state. Now, with all that to the side, let's get to the real game. The second you enter a lobby, you're greeted with a brief tutorial that teaches you the basic gameplay loop. You throw out your line, wait for a bite, and then hold the mouse button to reel until you get your fish. As you reel, there will be these barriers that you have to mash a certain amount of times in order to break through. This system was designed very well to accommodate the social aspects of web fishing, but it can also be very versatile when it comes to customization and upgrades. As you play the game and sell more fish, you'll gradually upgrade your fishing rod and be able to catch bigger and rarer fish. It works like one of those Roblox tycoon games, if you grew up playing those, where you join a server and gradually make your fishing ability more effective and profitable. It's a very satisfying loop, which keeps the player's attention just enough to be engaging, but not so much that it's overwhelming and takes away from hanging out with friends and talking. The fishing in web fishing is essentially an idle game, like Cookie Clicker. I've seen some criticize the system for being boring or too simplistic, but I think that's kind of ridiculous. Not every game has to have this insane amount of mechanical depth in order to be good. If there was a Sega Bass Pro Fishing level of depth in this game, it would take away from the cozy atmosphere by forcing the player to think too much while playing. And if you're thinking so much about fishing, then you're not going to want to be thinking about talking to your friends. Because the last thing I need when I'm trying to do a very difficult, high-effort task is one of my buddies yelling in my ear about how good his date went last night. There's actually a really good example of what happens when you try to combine a low-key fishing game with an insane amount of mechanical complexity. It's called Big the Cat. You want to know why people hate this stupid cat in Sonic Adventure so much? It's because the game decided to make its fishing the most gimmicky, complicated nonsense ever invented by man. I have played through this game like a dozen times and I still don't know how any of it works. If web fishing had this fishing system, it would have sold like 30 copies and have an overwhelmingly negative score on Steam. You would have had to pay me to buy that shit. Now granted, it is possible to balance a complex system with a cozy vibe and atmosphere, but it's very difficult and can easily fall apart if you don't know what you're doing. So with that said, I think web fishing's fishing does a great job at accommodating its focus on making friends and interacting with others in a social space. And speaking of that social space, let's take a look at this server I just joined. I'm sure that there's a bunch of great people for me to get to know and oh no. Yeah, so another reason why the lack of updates has absolutely crippled this game is the incredibly limited moderation tools. If the host is AFK from their server, there's no way to kick anyone from the lobby. It's a power that only the host has. There's no vote kick system or anything. There are a handful of client-side solutions that have been implemented, things that only apply to the individual, such as disabling the chalk drawings or muting specific people, but they're more or less band-aid solutions. Ideally, a game like this should be given tools that allow the players to mod and govern themselves, but web fishing doesn't have that, and never will. So right now, many public servers are unmoderated hellscapes with slurs, porn, and whatever else all over the place. The majority of the servers you'll encounter are perfectly fine, but it makes the server list feel like a minefield, where you have no idea what you'll see the second you spawn in. On some level, this is actually really cool. Part of the reason why I initially enjoyed web fishing is that I missed an era of the internet where corporations weren't over-moderating every online space they had control over. A place where you could just, talk to people and not be worried about being spied on by a higher power. But this is, way too far in the other direction. And between the hackers, network vulnerabilities, and rampant debauchery in a lot of these servers, it really makes web fishing a wild west of sorts to experience today. Now, you may enjoy that, but I don't think most people do. For better or for worse, you never know what kind of people you'll run into while playing. Oh, here's something you may not know. There's actually a really subtle influence that web fishing has baked into its aesthetic. It's really obscure, so you might not recognize it, but Webfishing actually takes a lot of its look and vibe from the 2001 Japanese N64 game Dobutsu no Mori, which is called Animal Crossing in the West. Yeah, so Webfishing's aesthetic is largely based off Nintendo's Animal Crossing series, specifically the first game on the N64 and its port on the GameCube. This was a major boon in the game's marketing and helped make the game more approachable for the average person. I really like this because, believe it or not, Animal Crossing is my second favorite Nintendo franchise behind Splatoon, and it's a game that I'll probably cover at some point on this channel. Frankly, I think Animal Crossing goes massively underappreciated in the grand scheme of things. These games are insane technical undertakings that manage to have a huge amount of depth, while still maintaining an accessible and approachable atmosphere. They've also had an insane influence on a bunch of gaming's biggest hits, and Webfishing is one of the biggest examples of that from recent times. The game goes out of its way to look lo-fi and outdated, even placing this pixelation filter on everything when you start the game initially to make it look like something from the GameCube or N64 era. I always disable this though because it makes the game harder to look at for me, and also makes my footage look crunchy and, less professional. Not to mention, I think that the art direction of Webfishing does a good job capturing this aesthetic without this weird pixelation filter muddling what you can and can't see. The whole game utilizes this very fall-based aesthetic, with these soft browns and yellows accenting the blue water really nicely. It makes for a nice composition, and the relatively consistent color palette actually allows for the developer to mark important things in contrasting colors. The color palette goes a long way to make the game easy to look at as well, which is good for a game where you're supposed to spend hours talking to people. Now that aside, one of the areas where Animal Crossing excels is in how dynamic its environments are. Nearly everything in these games is interactable, with many of them having goodies in place to reward the player for exploring and trying new things. This, combined with the changing weather and day-night cycle, makes the game really feel alive, like a little town in your pocket or on your TV. The dynamic nature of Animal Crossing is something that Webfishing largely lacks. There's no day-night cycle or changing seasons, and nearly all the fish in the game are able to be caught at all times. This is something that seems like a no-brainer. Having a day-night cycle where certain fish can be caught at certain times would encourage people to stay longer and talk with people, waiting for the right time of day to catch the fish that they need. But I don't know, like a lot of things with Webfishing, this could have been one of those things that the developer was planning to have if they hadn't been digitally blackballed from ever making a video game again. There's so many pieces of Webfishing that are like this, places where the game was so close to being something better, and it's clear that there was going to be more, but instead there's just a dead end and a sign saying that your IP's been stolen instead. Webfishing's UI is really good as well, with the rounded corners and modern style font making every menu really readable. I think a lot of indie developers skimp out on good UI and aesthetic design because they're so focused on making the gameplay good, and while the gameplay should definitely be the priority, good UI makes interfacing with that gameplay feel snappy and easy. You don't want someone to feel like they're filing their taxes every time they level up or change their equipment. You want it to feel like something to look forward to, and good UI design helps a lot with that. Luckily, Webfishing does a good job at making everything quick and snappy, with selling items and getting bait being as simple as clicking a single button. In fact, pretty much everything has been streamlined to be easy, which I think is an underrated part of Webfishing as a whole. The menial shit like customizing your character and upgrading your fishing rod is made as fast as possible so you can get to the actual fun stuff like fishing and drawing and talking to people. I think it's about time I talk about the progression of this game, but in order to do that, I think I'll actually need to, get through it, so, give me like 15 minutes and I'll be right back. Alright, I did some fishing off camera, just a bit of grinding, and now my gear's a tad better, so I think I'm pretty qualified to talk about the progression if that's okay with everyone. When you first open Webfishing, there's a few places you'll need to regularly return to in order to progress through the game. First, there's the quest board, which gives you goals aside from just buying and selling fish. When you do these, you get XP, which allows you to level up, which in turn lets you get new gear and accessories, which then let you fish even faster, and the cycle then repeats. Now, if you take a look at this cycle, you may notice something, and that's that everything in here only pertains to fishing. And you see, that's a big problem. The biggest issue with Webfishing's gameplay is that it doesn't do a great job at incentivizing the player to do anything but fish, because the only other way to get money is by literally gambling for it. And while that is really funny, it also means that whenever a player gets bored of fishing, they won't have much else to do. Now, of course, half of Webfishing is the web part, and people are ideally going to spend as much time talking to each other and making friends as they will straight up catching fish. But that still doesn't excuse the lack of offerings here. Other chat room games like Club Penguin offer an insane variety of minigames that players can enjoy, which increases the replayability of the game significantly. Not to mention that these are often cooperative games, so players can do them together with their friends, adding to the social aspect of the game. This is a huge missed opportunity on Webfishing's part, since even the fishing, the core of the game, doesn't have any cooperative component baked in. It's not like there's a fishing duel minigame that I could challenge my friend to, or some special fish that I could only catch with 2 people helping me. For me, because I've basically 100% of the game, joining a server amounts to me just trying to talk to people. And if no one's talking when I join, there's really no point in me being there, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of the game. You may think I'm being too harsh. I mean, it's only a $5 Steam game, right? And it does give you a fun experience for that price, but WebFishing gets so much else right that it genuinely frustrates me how excellent it could have been with just a few more additions and tweaks. Another example of this is the props. The props are a really well done system, with a lot of cool items like the chalk and guitar which have massive creative potential. Like, I have seen insanely talented people draw some really cool stuff with the chalk, as well as copious amounts of porn. And the guitar is such a dynamic item that people have found ways to play pretty much every popular song you could think of on it. These items are examples of the insane potential that this game has when it comes to interactive experiences with people. It just sucks because there's no in-game incentive for doing these things. They could have been easy, just make it where the player gets money for strumming notes or drawing with the chalk. But no, there's really no reason to interact with these things if you don't like drawing or playing the guitar already. There's also a bunch of stuff that just seems unfinished. Like, every player can access 3 different private islands. These are entirely individual locations that could have been WebFishing's very own igloos, as they're tied to each individual player and don't cross over. Imagine if you could have your very own Tortimer Island to show people in different servers. Genuinely endless possibilities with enough customizations, and maybe even exclusive fish you could find on each island. But in the final game, they're just empty. There's legit no reason to go here because of how flat and bland the islands are. Another example is the map itself. If you've ever explored Pawprint Point, you know that it's way bigger than it initially appears. There's a ton of lakes and benches on the upper area that go completely ignored by most players. The reason for that is that there's no reason the game ever gives you to go up here. It feels like this area would be the prime spot to put some sort of minigame or interactable object or, anything to make this area worthwhile. As it stands, this area will forever be empty space that can't be used for much of anything. It's like for everything this game does well, there's somewhere in the game that just seems massively unfinished. It's a game that screams unrealized potential, and it's a potential that could have been finished with just a few updates and seasonal events. But because the developer was, these things will never come to fruition. And despite all of that, I still think that WebFishing is, overall, a good game. In some places, I even think it's exceptional. The social aspect of this game is top-notch, with everything integrating perfectly to encourage the players to talk to each other and collaborate. It's obvious that West's original vision for this game was for it to be a fun social space for people, and that vision is realized in the big things as well as some small quality of life stuff, like the ability to send letters to one another, or how typing certain words and emoticons makes your character expression match that message. There's an insane amount of polish and charm put into certain aspects of web fishing, which just goes to show how passionate the developer was about it, and how much potential it had to be amazing. When I first played this game, I was enamored by the potential the game had. It was clear that there were so many different things that were begging to be polished, additions that were obvious to be coming in the future. The core social experiences were something that hadn't really been captured in a game in a very long time. It was a breath of fresh air, and if it were updated consistently, I think it would still have a significant contingent of players who play the game regularly today. But as it stands, WebFishing is a shell of what it could have become, and a game that's hard to recommend to people. Like, I know this is just a silly $5 video game, right? But it genuinely makes me sad to see how the story of WebFishing turned out. However, for all the game lacks on its own, it's made up for in the influence that it's had on the indie game scene. It was a game that showed that there was a market for small, cozy chat room hangout games. And since then, games like Atlas, On Together, and Sledding Game have all taken the blueprint WebFishing set and built upon it, creating spaces where people are able to get together and meet other users to just hang out and play some games. There's even a spiritual successor to WebFishing in development, as a development team is currently attempting to capture that lightning in a bottle effect another time. But while these games will flourish, WebFishing itself exists in a near-empty state, bleeding players, doomed to be abandoned forever. It's a game that exists as a reminder of what can happen when an online space isn't maintained and cultivated. When a space for people to hang out is left to rot for years, it can become overgrown, filled with hackers and exploits that make it difficult for people to enjoy the game like they once did. Perhaps WebFishing would still be thriving today if it were actively taken care of and updated, if the developer weren't doxxed into obscurity. But as it stands today, the game will continue to fade into the background, a one-hit wonder that will never see the spotlight again.